well, or middle school educators. You guys are a weird bunch. I consider myself part of that crew as well. So I made the jump from uh, teaching kids to wrangling adults. So out in the field. So my job now is basically helping manage the day-to-day operations of Red Hill Birding and then also doing tours. So I just got back from the San Diego Bird Festival like 4 hours ago. So I was at the San Diego Bird Festival. If you guys ever want a bird festival to go to, you should go to the Urban Birding Festival in Chicago. But after that, you should make sure you go to San Diego. It's a really good festival. But enough about that. We're going to talk about an introduction just to warbler identification tonight. Everybody knows what this warbler is. This will be the first part. Blackburnian warbler. Great. It's one of the best warblers for many people. It's their favorite warbler. For some people, it's kind of the spark warbler as well. I just want to kind of give you a basic idea of what we're going to do here for this presentation. So if you guys were expecting me to go through like each one of the warblers, I'm not going to do that. I've had presentations where I have done that, and I kind of start to see everybody's eyes kind of start glazing over after about warbler number 2 or 3. So we're not going to do that. We're going to kind of break it down in a little bit of a different way. So first, we're just going to go over you're out birding. It's kind of the whole concept is you're out birding, and you can kind of use this. So the first thing is this even a warbler? Let's just start there. I'm looking at this bird. Is it even a warbler? Once you figure out it is a warbler and you don't know what it is, so some of you guys might already know what a lot of the warblers are already, but let's say it's it's a warbler, you don't know what it is. Okay, now what do I look at? Like, what do I look at this bird? Because warblers are often moving fast, so I only have a crucial few seconds. That the idea could be maybe I pull out my camera and get a photo, but even then, what do I look at to make the decision as to what this bird is? We're going to go over some behavior and habitat clues as well to kind of help you narrow down what you're looking at. And then we're going to kind of talk about where and how to watch warblers. And then at the end, we'll go over a few examples of kind of putting this all into practice just for a few common warblers. And hopefully the idea will be that you just have a few extra tricks that you can use in the spring to be able to identify warblers. Now, if this works, I'd be impressed. Yeah, it doesn't work. I still have my little laser pointer, so that's good. Okay, let's start just with me making my screen so I can see it on here. Okay. Am I even looking at a warbler? That's the first thing you want to do. So you see a bird pop into your binoculars. Is it a warbler? The first thing you're going to notice is, one, it's a small bird. All warblers are small. They have variations within the warblers. There are big warblers, but there's no truly big warbler that's bigger than a blackbird or a robin or any of that. They're always going to be small. They're a small bird with a thin bill. So you've got all of your other small birds. There are some other ones that have thin bills as well, but they're a small bird with a thin bill, and they typically have a horizontal posture. So this is one of my favorite warblers. This is a golden-winged warbler. Very small, thin bill, typically have kind of a longer tail. And the reason I bring up the posture is because a lot of other birds don't have that posture. So sparrows, for example, aren't always going to be vertical, or they're always going to be horizontal, but they can be a little more vertical. But especially flycatchers, if you see a small bird flying up in the trees and they land and they have that vertical posture, you can pretty much rule out that you're looking at a warbler. The other thing is that they're very, very active. So they're exceptionally active. One of the quickest ways to tell if you're looking at a warbler or if you're looking at a vireo is actually how active they are. So a vireo, when they bounce around, they'll jump to a branch and they'll actually stop for a little bit, kind of look around, and then they'll jump to another branch, stop for a little bit, look around. Warblers are, for the most part, always moving. They're always active. So that's going to be a big clue that you're looking at a warbler. The only other birds that I think are more active than warblers would be ruby-crowned kinglet and blue-gray gnatcatcher. Ruby-crowned kinglet always flick their wings. So if you see a bird that's constantly flicking their wings, it's almost like they've got a fly on their back and they're trying to get it off all the time. So if you see a bird doing that, you can pretty much know really quick that's a ruby-crowned kinglet and not a warbler, but very active. And in the spring, Um, Especially a lot of our species are exceptionally colorful. So really colorful bird, small bill, actively moving, doesn't have that horizontal posture. Okay, you found a warbler. So if that was a little basic for everybody, I understand. But for some of you guys, if you didn't know how to identify or even know that you're looking at a warbler, that can make a big difference. Wrens are also pretty active, but they typically have that little tail that's cocked up, and they are more secretive, and they're not high up in the trees gleaning. They're not actively gleaning like a warbler would be. So this is a quick example about the thin bill versus the not thin bill. So on the left, we have a red-eyed vireo, and the one that is commonly mistaken for a red-eyed vireo, this is the Tennessee warbler. So you can kind of see on this one here that the vireo bill is thick, and if you use your imagination, you can actually see it's got a little bit of a hook that kind of goes down, where the Tennessee warbler, without even going into the other details, it's got a much thinner bill. They'll even sometimes in the winter, in the tropics, they'll actually supplement their normal diet of insects for nectar. So they have a very thin bill that they can use to actually pierce flowers to get nectar out of it as well. Okay, so what do you look at when you're looking at a warbler? I just want to start off by saying I've looked at a lot of warblers in my life. I've been birding since I was 5 years old. I don't know what my first warbler was. The last warbler I saw was a yellow rump warbler in California. Somewhere in between that's thousands and thousands of observations, to the point where it's pretty much automatic to me when I see a warbler to quickly figure out what it is. And so the whole point of this presentation, though, is to help you guys go through that process that I went through. So this presentation was basically me sitting down and thinking, okay, what do I do when I see a bird and I don't know what it is? And it's a warbler. So instead of, like I said, instead of doing this big brain dump of just each warbler and breaking down every field mark of every warbler where you're scribbling all that stuff down, I want to go into the idea of just how we do the process of that. So especially if you're a newer birder, this can help you kind of take warbler identification to a new level. If you're a more experienced birder, this is kind of an idea of what you can do when you have, and everybody has this moment where you look at a bird and you're like, I have no idea what that bird is. So hopefully this will be a way of looking over this. This is my favorite warbler. This is black-throated blue warbler. It is objectively the best warbler. So if it's not yours, I recommend you change your mind. They're gorgeous. They've got a beautiful song. The blue and white color, the patterns, all of it is just, it's perfect. And there's a lot of, unique things about them identification wise. If you've learned how to bird, you probably would have picked these things up. You've got the blue back, you've got the bright blue head, and you've got the bright contrast in color on the belly. And of course, everybody's favorite field mark is the little tiny white check on the primary coverts that is very, or on the base of the primaries that become very visible even from a distance, which is why, this is, by the way, how everybody wants to see this bird. If you want to see the best warbler in the world, this is usually how you want to see it. It's like this. But even in a distance, these field marks are still visible. So this is how you normally see a black-throated blue warbler. This is my photo. The other one was a great one from Cornell. This is my photo. You can't see the blue that well, but you still see what I noticed on this bird right away is I noticed it's got a dark top and a pale belly. And of course, if you wait around long enough, you're still going to see this little white check in the wing, which really stands out. So again, that point is still there. The pale belly is still there, and you can still see the dark coloration on the top. So you don't have to get a field guide view of a bird to make an identification. You want to have the field guide view of the bird because it's great. But if your goal is to just be identifying warblers, you don't need to have that good of a look. Okay, so let's talk about what I look at when I look at a warbler and I don't know what it is. The first thing I always look at are the wings, which sometimes will take some patience as you're waiting for the bird to fly around. So when you're looking at the wings, you want to be looking at for a few things. One, you want to be looking at, does this bird have wing bars, or does it have any kind of wing edging or wing patches? That's the first thing I look at. So this is a magnolia warbler in the spring. They've got this really unique, they have a lot of unique things about them. But one of the things that's really unique is just this bright white patch on the wings. There are very few other warblers that have that bright white patch. And you also want to look for a lack of wing bars. A lot of identifying warblers, and really you can use this for identifying birds in general, is you're not trying to figure out what the bird is, you're trying to figure out what the bird is not. So that's the main thing when it comes to warblers. So if you see this wing patch, you've basically ruled out in the east, we've ruled out all the warblers except for two. Do you guys know what the other one is? It also has a wing patch like this. Think about it. Yeah, I don't have a photo of it, but it's Cape May warbler. Cape May warbler in the spring also has that patch. But you've basically ruled out all, you don't have to see, you know, all the different coloration and the details and all that. All you need to really look for are a few things. So on the wings, does it have wing bars or does it not have wing bars? Are they strong wing bars or are they weak wing bars or are there none at all? And don't get too bogged down looking for detailed coloration, but do look for strong patterns. So like that photo I showed you earlier of the black-throated blue. You know, you might be looking at it and be like, it doesn't look blue, you know, but you can see that white patch. You know, that is a very, very unique feature on that bird. So you don't want to necessarily look for color, even though these birds are really colorful and you want to see all the colors. When you're trying to identify the bird, you want to look for patterns. You want to look for strong things that stand out because that's pretty much going to help you rule out a lot of the birds that you're looking at. So for example, this is a golden wing warbler. I don't have to see the whole bird to know that it's a golden wing warbler. Even a really quick view, it's not even necessarily that it's yellow and gray, but it's the sharp contrast between the two. So the yellow, there's no other warbler to know for sure that I'm looking at a golden wing warbler. This is good enough. This is a very obvious example. There are more warblers that are way more difficult than that. But still, it gives you the idea that I don't have to see the whole bird to be able to identify it, especially when it comes to the wings. The other thing I look for is I look for any kind of facial pattern or any kind of colors on the face as well. So I look for like patches or braces that you can see on the face. So these things can be, you know, behind the eye, in front of the eye, they can have, or a lack of patterning. So one thing I can look for, you know, the Blackburnian warbler has a very distinct little mark that goes behind the eye and kind of wraps around in this brace. I forgot, there's actually 3 warblers that have the patch. This one as well. Blackburnian also has that distinct wing patch. So now you've got Blackburnian, Cape May, and Magnolia. Sorry. Still stuck in California. I need to get my brain right. Yeah. All those birds would be really great to see out there. But yeah, the patterning on the face is really important as well. And also to look for the lack of patterning. Another good one, this is worm-eating warbler. They have got a very distinct line that goes through the eye, kind of similar to a chipping sparrow. So if I see a warbler and I right away and I notice, you know, I don't see any wing bars, and you see that white line, that kind of line that goes through the face, it's really quick to know that you're probably dealing with a worm-eating warbler. You also want to be looking for eye rings or eye arcs. To you in a second. You want to be noticing, is there a distinct eye ring? Are there marks above and below the eye? So if you get a good look at the face, those are the things you want to look at way before you're looking at color or, you know, did that warbler have an orange throat? Because, you know, if you're looking backlit at a Blackburnian warbler, you don't actually always see the orange throat that well. It takes a lot to not see the orange throat because it's one of the best warblers, but sometimes you can't see it, but you can still see the patterning on the face, even at a distance. And then also look at the bill length and shape. That takes a little bit more experience. I mean, you want to be looking for the most part if it's a thin bill back to being a warbler, but you know, you can kind of see it here that the Blackburnian's got this really thin little needly bill, but the worm-eating warbler's got a real chisel on its face for a warbler. You had a question.
Yeah, I was going to point that out. And is warbler a scientific classification or?
No, not even close. I'll go over that. I'll get back to that one in a little bit. Warbler is kind of a general term. A bunch of people use warbler for everything. But for us, we're speaking specifically about North American wood warblers, not European warblers or or other ones like that. These are just some more examples of just patterning on the face and contrast. A lot of times when you see a black-throated green warbler, which is this top one, it's the sharp contrast between the throat and the face in spring that really stands out. So even if you don't get a great look at the whole bird, you'll notice that distinct contrast between the face and the throat. This one again, you can already see the two wing bars, and so you've begun to narrow down a lot of the species just by seeing those wing bars. And then the one down here, this is the northern Parula. They have eye arcs. You can see the little tiny eye arcs there, which you don't always see very well. And there's just kind of this messy pattern in the front. You've got the white belly and then the kind of yellow going into, if you get a really good look at the throat, it's absolutely gorgeous. But in reality, when you're looking at this bird, usually what you see is this kind of like dark spot in the center and a yellow throat. So the difference between eye arcs and eye rings, we'll go over that a little more, is you can see that they're kind of broken. So on the Parula, they've got a arc on the bottom and they have an arc on the top. It's not connected to make a ring. So eye arcs and eye rings are two different things. It's very hard sometimes to get a great look to know, like, was that a broken eye arc or was that a full eye ring? But hopefully you've already taken into account some of the other things I've told you, and that'll help you rule those things out. So, okay, patterns and overall colors and markings. So this is something else that's important when you're looking at warblers. A lot of times when you're looking at warblers, you're looking straight up at a bird. So you want to notice right away, does the belly have any kind of streaking or patterning on it at all? And where is it located? So on this Cape May warbler, for example, it's got a lot of dense streaking up top, and then it has very, very fine streaking going down. But a lot of warblers have zero streaking on the belly at all. So being able to look at a warbler and decide does it have streaking or not can help you rule out a lot of them as well. Again, if you get a good look at the color, look for a general base color. Am I looking at a brownish warbler? Was it more black? Was there bright yellow? Were there contrasting black and white colors? Patterns of color and really distinct, what's the word I'm looking for? Contrast would be good. So like a bright red throat up in the canopy, you don't have to see the whole bird to know that you just saw a Blackburnian warbler. Does it have a yellow cheek? Does it have yellow breast? Does it have a black throat? All really important. If you get a really good look at it, you can see the back. Are there stripes on the back? If you see stripes on the back, that's another way to help you know and help you rule out some of the species that you could be looking at. And then some of them, of course, of our warblers are really distinct, and you just kind of have to memorize. This is an oven bird. Oven birds are notorious for walking on the ground. So if you see a warbler walking on the ground, you've got very few options. You're looking basically at Connecticut warbler or an oven bird. Any questions so far? Kind of went over a lot of stuff.
Are there any birds, other birds that warblers that have the eye arc?
Okay, so
Yes, I've heard of that.
for those in Zoom, they're asking, is there any other warblers that have the eye arc? There are a few. The most common one that we have is going to be the Parula, and then out west they've got one as well. The McGillivray's warbler also has a very distinct eye arc as well. And I'm drawing a blank on the other ones.
Magnolia had just one.
The Magnolia has a little tiny mark as well. Yep. So this is just an example of some of the kind of the patterning and coloring that you can see on a warbler. A real kind of hot take if you want to be able to identify a cerulean warbler, which is everybody loves cerulean warblers, but they love to stay really high up on the tree. One of the things that you can notice way before you notice any of the cerulean color is just this big band that goes across the chest there. So there's a big band, white throat, white belly. Is a great way to be able to identify a cerulean warbler way before you see the colors that you really want to see. So if you want to, and of course hearing their song, which that's a whole nother PowerPoint to go over song. But you can see it when they're really close up, you might not actually notice the breastband because you're so enthralled by the color. But the farther away a bird goes, you end up having to rely on different field marks. So on this one, it's the color right there. Same for bay-breasted warbler. Everybody wants to see that beautiful bay color, and in reality, most of the time that you see a bay-breasted, it's actually really hard to get a good look at that color scheme. But what does stand out when they get farther away is this little hood they have, which is really overexposed for me there. But this one here, you can see that hood even from a distance. If I see two wing bars and I see that distinct hood that contrasts with the front of the head, it really helps you rule out basically every warbler except for bay-breasted. And then I just like this golden wing warbler, so I put it there. Golden wing warbler is the second. It's the second best warbler. Okay, another thing that's really important when it comes to identifying warblers is going to be their habitat and their behavior. Behavior more than habitat. So a great example of this would be the black and white warbler, which we'll go over in a little bit. But again, I have this photo in here to show, this is a photo I took of a cerulean warbler that was really, really, really high up in a tree because that's their favorite place to be. Every once in a while, you'll see them come down low. But I also just noticed as well, it's really easy to tell that this is a cerulean warbler, even though you can't see the blue, because you can see that little tiny bar right there on the front. Okay, habitat. Let's go into that a little bit about identifying a warbler. First thing you want to ask yourself is, am I in open habitat or am I like in the woods itself? A lot of warblers specialize in being on open habitat and kind of more disturbed areas. So like palm warblers, yellow rump warblers, common yellow throats, they're going to be much more likely to be seen in kind of more open habitat. So if you go into a field guide or you have Merlin on your phone and they describe where they like to be, that's important stuff to be able to look at that and say, okay, where am I? Am I in deep woods? Am I in a thicket? Or am I in the side of a road on some really disturbed habitat? Am I in my neighborhood? Are they high in the tree or are they really low down? That'll also make a difference. A lot of warblers specialize at feeding high in the trees. A lot of our favorite warblers, Blackburnian, black-throated green, Cape May, they all love being very high in the trees. But some warblers are actually like to be lower down. So mourning warbler, Connecticut warbler, which everybody always wants to see. Um, um, Ovenbird, Canada warbler, these are all birds that like to be lower down. Also, is it near water? Are you next to a swamp? And you hear you see this beautiful yellow bird in the swamp. This is a prothonotary warbler. They love being near water. Is it standing water or moving water? I make that point specifically for Louisiana water thrush. So if you want to find Louisiana water thrush in Lake County in early spring, you almost always find them near some kind of moving water. They breed along clear streams, but northern water thrush, they like specifically being near stagnant water. But the main thing to remember about all of this, especially for spring migration, is this is not the golden rule during spring migration. Migration, everything is off when it comes to habitat. You could have a Connecticut warbler in your backyard. You could have a Parula sitting in your low garden and a Cape May if the weather's cold. This is especially important when you're in a breeding area. A lot of birds become much more habitat specific during breeding, but when they do get settled into an area and it's not really bad weather, birds do fall into their patterns. So a really bad weather day and all the insects are low down, you're going to see high treetop warblers going all the way down to the ground, which is really nice. It's just hard for the birds. But on a normal spring day and it's you're out birding, a lot of these birds are going to follow that basic rule. Some birds like being high up, some like being really low, some like being in the mid canopy, which is a magnolia warbler. They like being kind of in the middle. Behavior is also way more important than habitat because behavior is something that these birds really can't turn off. That's something that they're always going to do. It's just in their DNA. So one thing to always look for is this warbler bobbing its tail or wagging its tail. Everybody knows the number one behavior bird that does that is the palm warbler. But does anybody know the other warblers that wag or bob their tail? Water thrushes. So both of those wag their tail, but there's two other ones that people really want to see in Lake County that also do that. Does anybody know? Blue-gray gnatcatcher does, but then you'd be like, oh, it's not a warbler. Because you went through the rest of the presentation and you ruled it out. The other two are prairie warbler. They are a tail wagger. They constantly wag their tail. And Kirtland's warbler, the one up from Michigan. So if you see a big warbler on the ground bobbing its tail and it doesn't look like a palm warbler, just get a photo because it could be a Kirtland's warbler. Another thing to think about as well is how and where it's foraging. So the classic one for that would be the black and white warbler. The black and white warbler is always moving up and down. And so you can almost tell a black and white warbler way before you see any of the specific details just by how it's moving. Sorry, I forgot one more thing here. No, I did not. Another thing to consider is also some warblers like to fly out and grab insects a lot more than other ones. Yellow rump warblers, they like to fly catch a lot. They'll run out, they'll fly out and they'll grab things. You'll never see a Connecticut warbler do that. They're always going to be low and they have a totally different way of feeding. Their biology is not meant to do that. But the yellow rump and a few of the other warblers, if it's a lot of the treetop warblers, will also do that fly catching thing. So it's something to help you, again, rule out other options. So it's not necessarily about the identification of the bird, which you're going to ultimately get to, but it's also ruling out a lot of other birds that are not going to be the birds you're looking at. Yes. Nope, that's just where it was. No, but their reason they're on there is that they specialize in eating insects within bark. So I often see them eating spiders. So they'll go around the bark. And so when you see them moving on a tree, they're never on the outer edges of it or foraging in the leaves or like doing the gleaning where they kind of hover and grab stuff. They are almost always on the bark itself because that's just how they're made. They're made to get insects out of bark. And so that's where you're going to find one. So if you see a warbler that's creeping around like that, it's almost certainly going to be a black and white warbler, but not always. There's never a 100% in any birding. The final key that I always tell people to keep in mind is status and distribution. So what time of year is it? Especially in May, even early May and late May are totally different seasons in Lake County. So that plays a very important role. So knowing, like this is a chart, knowing that, Connecticut warbler, you can see there's hardly any reports. Some of these are probably weren't even Connecticut warblers, but you go all the way to the end of May and they really start to peak, where Nashville's peak early in May. So Nashville and Connecticut warbler are two hooded warblers that both have eye rings. And I have a lot of times in early spring, people send me photos and be like, I think I saw a Connecticut warbler. And then they tell us it was near the top of the tree. It was moving around and it's May 1st. It's almost always going to be a Nashville warbler. Later in spring is the secret for Connecticut warbler and mourning warbler as well. As you can see, mourning warblers, sometimes their migration, they go all the way into June. So sometimes you'll see them even into mid-June migrating. You can see migration's always, this is kind of a side note, migration's always happening. Look at this little tiny gap between when the mourning warblers last appeared and when they started showing back up again in August. It's kind of impressive. Okay, how to use some of these new skills that you have, and there's going to be some more identification stuff we're going to get into as well. Look at the bird. If your goal is to identify a warbler like in the field while you're birding, look at it for as long as you can. If you want to get a photo, if that's your natural inclination to grab a photo and snap some, do that as well. But then go back to looking at the bird for as long as you can. Look for the patterns on the birds that you can see with the least emphasis on color. So there are very important colors to look at. Warblers are beautiful, but the lighting is almost always bad when you really want to identify a warbler. So try to focus on the patterns that you can see and don't get stuck on the minor details of that bird. Don't say like, okay, now how was that wing bar shaped? Or, how big were its feet? What color were the legs? I see that a lot with blackpoll warbler, which is a whole nother talk for the fall. Color on the legs. Those are very difficult to see even under the best conditions. So focus if your emphasis being on strong patterns in color, wing bar, what's going on with the face? Are there eye rings? Are there no eye rings? And that'll help you narrow down so much. And then note where you are. Where are you? How is the bird behavior? And if you're still not sure what it is, just let it go. And I say that because if you try to fit a bird into a box, you're creating these neural pathways that might not be correct. The longer you can let a bird just, or let a warbler in this case, because you've already decided it's a warbler. As long as you can let a warbler be a warbler without putting a label on it for as long as you can, the more you're going to be able to actually observe the bird. Because if you try to say, oh, I think it's this, then your brain is going to start seeing the things that you want to see. It's happened to me. I guarantee you it's happened to everybody in this room. When you want a bird to be something, it starts becoming that because, you force it to be that way. So just let it go. Okay, let's put it into practice just with a few Chicago spring warblers. So here's the yellow warbler. This is the field guide version of the warbler. This is the male. A few things, again, using the kind of practices that we kind of use. One, no wing bars. No wing bars on a yellow warbler, but everything is, and every inch of this bird is covered in yellow. The color patterns is just yellow. That's the color pattern, the whole thing. Look at the face as well. There's no really distinct any kind of marking on the face at all. And this plays a role in every season with the yellow warbler. So this is the male. They have the unique, beautiful orange streaks. But if you don't see the orange streaks as well, if you just notice that everything about it, yellow, 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 yellow undertail coverts, look at the whole tail. The whole thing is yellow, every portion of it. And I could have gone into more detail about all the tail patterns, but I feel like that's a way more advanced thing. And that would be getting stuck in the details. If you want to go over that, I love that stuff too. But for the sake of this talk, we're not going to go deep into that. But again, and notice where you are. Habitat with yellow warbler, you're not going to usually see them in deep woods. You're not going to be in the middle of Ryerson Woods in the forest and see a couple of yellow warblers bouncing around. They're usually always on the edge. If you get a good look at the male, again, you're going to see those orange streaks, but usually you don't get a good look at it. And you start getting farther away, the orange streaks become less obvious, but still, no wing bars, nothing going on the face. The whole thing is yellow. Still a yellow warbler. And you start getting females as well. This one's taking an early spring. And again, you don't really see much of the bird, but you can say, whoa, it's a really thin bill. It's a warbler. It's not a goldfinch. All I see is yellow. It's going to be a yellow warbler. Same for this one. No wing bars, no pattern, all yellow, nothing going on besides yellow. It's a yellow warbler. And it plays, and even as you get farther away of the bird, this is a yellow warbler, I think from Waukegan Beach. Nothing going on. The only one that you would confuse this one with would be like a Wilson's warbler. But again, if you didn't get a good look at the cap and you're like, oh, did I get a good look at the cap? Maybe it was a Wilson's. Let it go. If you didn't get a good look at the cap in a first female Wilson's warbler in the fall, again, you've narrowed it down to those two things. That was either a yellow warbler or a Wilson's warbler. But if you didn't get a good look at the head, you might have to let it go and just let it be one of those two things. But in the spring, for the most part, the Wilson's warbler has a really distinct cap. And what you're looking at here is just an all yellow warbler. I don't see any wing bars. Again, if they had wing bars, it would stand out even from far away. And there's no pattern on the throat, or there's no pattern on the breast or the chest or the back. It's just kind of uniform yellow. You've really, for the most part, narrowed it down to just a few things. Another really common one in the spring, and one of my favorites as well, is black-throated green warbler. The main thing that stands out for everybody, obviously, is the facial pattern on this thing. The really bright yellow cheek, this kind of indistinct kind of braces on the face, but it's the real strong contrast for me between the yellow and the black on the males in particular. That strong, striking break between those two colors. They have a little bit of streaking on the flanks, and again, two wing bars. So we now have a wing barred warbler. So you know at least that you're dealing with that.
The green.
The green's on the back, and it's a pointless identification point. It's not pointless. But again, you would say if you were just like, oh, that's, well, it can't be a black-throated green warbler. Where's the green? This is technically the green up here. It's kind of more like a sludge green, olive green. So it doesn't really stand out that well at all. Are we good? No, we're not.
They talk about why that's not a palm on the previous one.
I mean, the main reason it's not a palm It's because it's
You're looking
brown.
At a yellow.
I'm looking at yellow. That's the main thing. Also, they the main thing about the palm warblers, they have a distinct yellow undertail covert, and they're always bobbing their tails is the other thing. So the behavior usually, if I see a warbler and I'm not sure what it is, and it's spring or fall, and I see bobbing a tail, which they always do. I mean, it's not like they do it one day and they don't do it the next day. Always bobbing their tail. So that's one of the main things is the behavior between those. Okay, this is the black-throated, again, black-throated green. Good point. Yes, you made a very good point. Where's the green? You can't see it that well. It's actually not that important of an identification point. But the farther away you get, you can kind of see the green there if you squint and use your imagination. But the real thing that you see is, again, the contrast between the yellow and the black. And you can kind of see some of the braces, but again, that's starting to disappear. If the light's really bad, the wing bars are kind of washed out, but you see the streaks on the side as well. So okay, I've got a warbler and it has streaks on the side. And there's a lot of contrast going on between the face and the throat. And on this view, which is kind of a different view as well, again, I notice, okay, this is a warbler. It's got streaks on the side. It's got wing bars. And even here, you can still see a little bit of that strong pattern on the face. You might not see it well. You might have to stick with the warbler for a little bit to get a better look, but you can automatically start ruling out a lot of birds. Even if you don't have a camera, you can remember, okay, maybe you can remember at the end of the day that it had wing bars, it had streaking on the side, and it had some strong patterning on the face. Even in the fall, when it becomes less obvious, you still have the same kind of pattern here. This is one of the first, this is probably a female. Again, wing bars are really strong. It's got yellow in the face. The black is kind of gone, but the streaking is still there on the side, even though it's blocked by this leaf. But again, it's that strong pattern between the yellow and the blank color here also really stands out. Again, my goal for this presentation is not to give you tips for each one of the warblers. It's to give you some kind of tool that you can then use when you're in the field. So, okay, let's talk about Nashville warbler. This is the really common one that people confuse with Connecticut warbler. Facial pattern, again, this is a helmeted bird. It's got this kind of gray hood. And again, this one actually has a very bold eye ring. If you see an eye ring on a warbler, you can say, all right, I can identify this one. It rules out so many of the other warblers. Wings, no wing bars on here at all. And then I noticed the whole underside here is yellow, including the throat. Habitat, really important. This is one of the small warblers. So again, warblers are all small, but this is a small warbler in a small family of birds. They got a little short tail. They're generally found in treetops or mid-level, rarely on the ground, and they're actively moving around. They're very, very, very busy warbler. So again, if you see eye arcs and you see it high up in a tree and it's actively moving around, and you notice that contrast between gray and yellow, it's almost certainly going to be a Nashville warbler. And here's a photo of the Connecticut warbler. The Connecticut warbler is, again, it's superficially very similar looking birds, but entirely different behavior. And this one, the main identification point between these, because a Nashville warbler can technically be down low with a Connecticut. The main thing you're looking at is the yellow throat versus the gray hood that goes all the way down into the chest. This one is also, I'll go into the weeds just for this one, for those that want to know. Another thing that really stands out with Connecticut warbler is they have very long wings, which you can't see here, but they also have very long undertail coverts. So they look like they have hardly any tail. So the undertail coverts are the feathers that cover underneath the tail of a bird. So if you look at this one, it goes almost all the way to the tip of the tail. The Nashville warbler ends here, and they actually have a longer tailed appearance. But the main thing is, for the most part, your Nashville warbler is going to be busy, active, moving around. Connecticut warblers, and I took this photo at Ryerson. It popped up and it sat there. If you're by yourself, this usually never happens in groups. It popped up and sat there and stared at me for 10 seconds. They tend to freeze. So they'll pop up and land and they'll freeze and they'll stare at you. And you kind of have a moment because it's such a rare warbler to see. And then they're gone. And then again, the other thing that you're going to notice about these two birds when it comes to status and distribution, Nashville warbler is common throughout the entire spring migration, from sometimes even into late April, or basically the start of May all the way through May. Connecticut warbler is pretty much always going to show up in the kind of May 15th and beyond. Sometimes they'll be there a little bit early. But that's when you start hearing them and looking for them more. Again, they're usually going to be walking on the ground, but usually what a Connecticut warbler is going to do is it's going to pop off the ground and land on a tree or a branch like that for a few seconds where you'll have your mouth agape and then the moment's over. But again, Nashville warbler, even from a distance, you're going to notice it's that strong contrast between the gray hood and the yellow belly and that big old eye ring. It's always going to be a key to look for. Where to watch warblers, lakefront locations. I gave this talk originally to a whole group, so you guys can just scratch off Montrose. It's too busy anyways. So you can go to Montrose. It really is incredible. But in Lake County itself, Illinois Beach State Park is a great place for warblers. Ryerson is a great place for warblers in the spring. Daniel Wright Woods. If you go, Waukegan Beach can be really good as well. But the main thing you want to do when it comes to warblers is, and I'll go to the end here at the beginning, wherever you can visit most regularly is the best place you can go birding. So don't feel like you have to go somewhere special to see warblers. If you got a park in your neighborhood and it's May, you can find a lot of warblers there as well. Weather also plays a role. I mean, in the spring, especially southwesterly winds are going to push birds towards Lake County, and that's going to be the most productive wind to go out there and see warblers early. If you have a whole day to go birding in the spring and you want to go looking for warblers, start on the lakeshore. So start first at like an Illinois Beach place or Waukegan, Fort Sheridan, and then in the afternoon start moving inland and go to the riverways. And that's where the most of the food is going to be. I've had days where I've stood at Waukegan Beach in the morning and watched warblers and watched them streaming out of Waukegan because they don't want to actually stay there all day. And they're making a beeline into more inland locations where there's going to be more food. So morning, best at Waukegan, best at Illinois Beach State Park. And then you want to start moving inland to look for warblers. Another thing about warblers in the spring is that there can sometimes be slow moments in between pockets of birds, and then it can get really, really, really busy. And all of a sudden there's warblers everywhere. Somebody mentioned that to me about what do you do when all of a sudden there's a million warblers around you and you're trying to identify them and you don't know what to do. The main thing is again, let it go. You're not going to be able to identify all of those warblers. You want to start just by looking at a warbler and sticking with it. You want to just, don't ignore the fact that there's a bunch of warblers around. If you can identify some of them really quickly, good. But just stick with the warbler and try to identify it and go one by one, and you're not going to see them all, and it's okay. Just list everything Merlin says. Done. And that's the whole presentation. No, but it is a stressful feeling, but I think the best way to take care of it is to really just take your time and just enjoy whatever bird you do see. The best timing with warblers is the one you're looking at and enjoy it because it's going to be over. May is really a really quick month as well. So don't stress yourself out. Try to have fun when you're looking at the warblers. Good resources, the illustrated checklist and eBird. If you're really kind of wanting to learn more about status and distribution of birds, look up the illustrated checklist of birds in Lake County. It's a really strong birding community when it comes to eBird users. So that the illustrated checklist that can show you the kind of abundance of birds is really, really accurate. Merlin Bird ID, get a bird pack for your region. It's really good. You can use Matt's ID and just have Merlin running the whole time, and you'll know every bird you saw right away. You don't have to do anything more. But really, Merlin is an incredible tool, especially if you're out in the woods and you're hearing a warbler and you're not sure what it is. If it's actively singing and it's really close to you, it's pretty good. And it can be a great way to kind of help you know, I know there's a blah, blah somewhere up here, and I'm going to go look for it. But it's a really good field guide. It has a lot of good photos, really good text that includes habitat information. Field guides are really important. So Sibley Field Guide is a really good one. Another one is the Warbler Guide. I got it if anybody wants to take a look at it. If you really want to start getting into warblers in flight and, the pattern of white on the tail and all these different aspects of Warbler ID that you can get into, this is a really good book as well. And they do a lot with spectrograms and understanding bird song. So if you're really into bird song, which I didn't want to pack in to make this a 2-hour presentation, this is a really good book if you want to take a look at it later. And then the other thing is join a walk. Go birding with other birders. Whether you're going with Lake County Audubon Society, which is great field trips, or you're out with friends, learning how to identify warblers together is always better, and you'll be able to help. You can always learn something new with somebody in the field a lot better than you can just by looking at a book. So go birding with other people. Any questions? That's all I've got for you guys, just to kind of go over warblers.